Okay, so you're a wealthy Roman senator, or perhaps even the emperor himself. You've just funded the construction of a magnificent new amphitheater. You're picturing it now, the roar of the crowd chanting your name, the glory of the games, the absolute certainty of political victory. You think you've secured your legacy. But before you start planning your victory parade, a scroll arrives. It's a bill from your lanista, your gladiator manager. It's not for the construction. We'll get to that nightmare later. No, this bill is for the inaugural games. To fill your new arena not with cheap entertainment, but with breathtaking spectacle. The price tag. Enough to bankrupt a lesser man. And that's just a start. You haven't bought a legacy. You've bought an obligation. Let's start with that first. Horrifying bill. The cost of putting on the games. You haven't just built a stadium. You've made a promise of panem et circenses, bread in circuses. This was the Roman formula for keeping the populace happy and peaceful, and it was your job as the elite to provide it. How much did it cost? The answer is astronomical. Historians estimate the cost of building the Colosseum itself was around 100 million sestertii. Trying to convert that to modern 2026 dollars is tricky, but we can use some anchors to give us a sense of scale. For context, a Roman legionary soldier earned about 900 sestertii a year. If a modern soldier's base pay is roughly $30,000, then a single sestertius had the purchasing power of about $33. That means the Colosseum's construction cost was in the ballpark of $3.3 billion. For that price, you could build at least 2 brand new state-of-the-art NFL stadiums today. This monumental expense was largely funded by the spoils of war, specifically from the siege of Jerusalem. But the construction is a one-time fee. The games are forever. You need gladiators. Most were slaves, but they were also highly trained, expensive assets. A top-tier gladiator was a superstar, and acquiring one or luring a retired champion back to the arena could cost a fortune. Then there are the wild animals. Sourcing exotic beasts like lions, elephants, and rhinos from across the empire was a logistical and financial nightmare. According to one edict, a single first-class lion could cost up to 150,000 denarii, which is 600,000 sesterces. Using our same modern equivalent, that's nearly $20 million. For one animal, that's like buying a brand new private jet just to have it killed in the arena. Now imagine sourcing thousands of animals for a single festival, as Emperor Trajan reportedly did. This isn't like running a modern for-profit stadium. This is a political investment, and the building itself demands upkeep. You'd need a permanent staff of workers to clean the stands, manage the complex machinery of the hypogeum, the underground labyrinth, and ensure the arena is ready for the next spectacle. You'd employ everyone from animal handlers, bestiarii, to the referees of the matches. There's no official figure for the annual cost, but between sponsoring games and maintaining the facility, you would be looking at a bill that could easily run into the millions of sesterces every single year, just to keep the crowds entertained and prevent them from turning on you. At this point, you're probably thinking, okay, the costs are huge, but it's the Colosseum. It must make a ton of money. And you're right, it does. It just doesn't make that money for you. This is the most important paradox of running a Roman amphitheater. The games were a massive economic engine, but the profit wasn't measured in coin. It was measured in power. These events were known as munera, duties or gifts to the people, sponsored by private citizens like yourself, or by the state, ludi. The real return on investment was political popularity. A spectacular set of games could win you votes, secure a higher office in the cursus honorum, the political ladder, or solidify your favor with the emperor. Julius Caesar famously launched his political career by borrowing heavily to stage magnificent games, a gamble that paid off in immense public support. The spectators, the Roman people, were grateful and showered him with honor and positions. But here's the catch. The primary revenue stream of a modern stadium, ticket sales, was largely non-existent. For Roman citizens, entry to the games was almost always free. It was a gift. Your revenue was the roar of the crowd, the support of the masses. The seating arrangement itself was a reflection of Roman social hierarchy, with the emperor and senators at the front and the lower classes at the very top. But they all got in for free. You bear the astronomical costs, while the direct economic benefit flows elsewhere to the food vendors, the souvenir sellers, and the merchants in the city enjoying the festive atmosphere. You only get what you make in political capital. This is a testament to the power of bread and circuses. The people felt a sense of entitlement to this entertainment. This is wonderful for a politician's career, but terrible for a business plan. It means any attempt to cut corners or charge for entry would be met with massive public backlash, destroying the very goodwill your investment was supposed to buy. You don't just own a building, You are the steward of a public expectation, and the mob is watching. Not so fast. Because what if there was a way to manage this ancient money pit? How did Roman elites actually balance the books? We've analyzed the historical records to piece together the real business plan of a Roman editor, the sponsor of the games. If you have another wild historical what if you'd like us to explore, let us know in the comments. We read all of them. All right, it's time to pivot. Standard thinking won't work. To make this venture sustainable, you have to stop thinking like a simple benefactor and start thinking like a Roman mogul. Your amphitheater isn't just a venue, it's a platform for influence and ancillary enterprise. The profit isn't in the event, but in the ecosystem around it. Here's the 5-point plan. First, the main product is political power. You don't sell tickets, you give away a spectacle to earn votes and public office. The more lavish the games, the greater the political return. Aspiring officials often went deep into debt to fund games, knowing that a successful event would secure them a powerful and lucrative position that would allow them to pay it all back. This is your primary high-stakes investment. Second, you control the talent. You own a gladiatorial school. A ludus, your manager, the lanista, trains, equips, and manages these warrior athletes. While many gladiators were slaves, the best became massive celebrities. You don't just use them in your own games. You can lease them out to other ambitious elites for their own munera. Wealthy Romans might even rent a famous gladiator for a private function, a service that commanded an exorbitant fee due to the high risk involved. Third, monetize the infrastructure. While the show inside is free for citizens, the Colosseum itself is prime real estate. The ground floor arcades and substructures of the amphitheater can be leased out to merchants. Imagine food stalls, wine vendors, and artisans selling souvenirs to the thousands of spectators flooding the area. This creates a steady stream of rental income that offsets some of your massive operational costs. Fourth, the digital realm's ancient equivalent, the image. The spectacle itself is a branding opportunity. A successful games featuring your name prominently displayed builds your reputation across the city and the empire. Poets might write about your generosity, and the stories of your magnificent beasts and heroic gladiators would travel, enhancing your personal brand. This isn't direct revenue, but it's invaluable social currency. Fifth and finally, the byproducts of the games. This is the grim reality of the business. After the venationes, wild animal hunts, the carcasses of exotic beasts could be sold for their hides, meat, or other parts. The bodies of executed criminals or even fallen gladiators might have economic value. Furthermore, the constant demand for weapons, armor, and stage machinery for the games supports a whole industry of craftsmen, which you, as the central organizer, could control or profit from. So, there's the plan. Could it actually work? Let's run the numbers and, more importantly, consider the risks. The profit potential was, in political terms, immense. A single legendary games could make you a household name and propel you to the highest echelons of Roman power. Ancillary revenues from renting out gladiators and commercial space could provide a substantial income stream. However, the perils were just as big. The single greatest risk was financial ruin. The cost of games could spiral out of control, and many elites bankrupted themselves in the pursuit of popularity. Even emperors felt the strain. Marcus Aurelius was famously forced to auction off palace treasures to fund the games and a war. Then there were the regulatory and political hurdles. As the empire progressed, the emperor's permission was needed to hold private games, and the role of editor became increasingly tied to state officialdom. Staging games that were too successful could be seen as a challenge to the emperor's own popularity, a dangerous game to play. A disaster, like a collapsed stand, could result in public disgrace and exile. And finally, there's the mob. The Roman people were a fickle audience. A boring or poorly managed spectacle could lead to riots. The pressure to constantly escalate the violence and grandeur was immense. You were on a treadmill of spectacle, and the moment you stopped, you risked being devoured by the very crowd you sought to please. So, what's the verdict? Could owning and operating a Colosseum be profitable? The answer is a qualified yes, but not in the modern sense. It was one of the riskiest political and financial ventures in the ancient world. You had to be more of a showman and political strategist than a businessman, constantly balancing public opinion, imperial favor, and your own finances. Your job wasn't to sell tickets, it was to invest in your own ambition.